Are you in a complicated relationship with your ADHD? Because mine is so weird. I'm kind of a perfectionist. Crap. And I hate being late. Where's my keys? And my glasses. And I'm also a workaholic. No, really. I thrive under pressure. Easy peasy. Almost done. Oh crap. Why do I always do this to myself? Let's be real. Our ADHD brains work a little bit differently. So if you've ever drank a cup of coffee to calm down or hyper-focused on a challenging project for hours, you might already know how ironic our ADHD brains can be. I'm Patty, the girl with blue energy. I have ADHD and bipolar disorder, and today I'm talking about the weird paradox we call ADHD. What's going on in our brains, and why do so many of us end up looking like the complete opposite of what people expect? The answer is, it's complicated. When most people think about ADHD, they picture someone who's always late, loses everything, procrastinates, talks too much, interrupts, never finishes anything. You get the point. And sure, that can be true for some of us, but it doesn't explain why so many of us don't fit that description at all. Some of us are rarely late, have systems for everything, and are pretty good at getting things done. So what's going on? The answer starts inside our ADHD brain. When you compare an ADHD brain with a neurotypical one, you might notice a lot of opposites. A stimulant calms us down instead of speeding us up. We can't remember what someone said to us 5 minutes ago, but we can remember every word to a song we learned in elementary school. We can't pay attention to a family movie, but we can watch YouTube videos on the world's largest lizards for hours. From an outsider's perspective, this might look like, oh, so you can pay attention when you feel like it. But inside our ADHD brain, that's not what's going on at all. So let's talk about the 4 biggest paradoxes going on inside our brain. Let's start with the attention paradox. You've probably heard of these two opposites, attention deficit and hyperfocus. This paradox means that sometimes we can't focus no matter how hard we try. And other times we can get so hyper-focused that we don't even know what time it is anymore. Some people think we just don't like paying attention to boring stuff. But if that's true, why is it that some boring stuff can hold our attention for hours? Like, did you know the Komodo dragon has this weird third eye? But other boring stuff, like my partner's geeky history shows, can lose me in less than a minute. We don't actually have an attention deficit, like we don't lack attention. We just have a problem with regulating it. So it's not that we can't pay attention. Our brains just struggle with when to start paying attention, when to switch, when to stop, and what's actually important to pay attention to in the first place. And there are a couple reasons for this. Dopamine is one of those reasons. Dopamine helps regulate things like learning, motivation, and attention. In an ADHD brain, dopamine signals aren't always sent or received in the same way they are in a neurotypical brain. The other reason is that some parts of our brain don't communicate very well with each other. Sometimes the focus signal is too weak, and other times it comes in full blast, so we're locked in for hours. The next paradox is the stimulant paradox. Stimulants are supposed to speed people up, right? Then why don't they work that way in an ADHD brain? Remember how I said our brains have trouble regulating dopamine? Well, stimulants increase the availability of dopamine and norepinephrine. These two neurotransmitters are involved in regulating motivation, attention, and executive functioning. This helps the parts of our brain responsible for focus and attention to communicate more effectively. So even though this sounds like it's stimulating you, it's actually helping your brain regulate attention better. Now let's talk about the memory paradox. This is why you can't remember what someone said 5 minutes ago, but you can remember random facts you learned about 20 years ago. Working memory is sort of like note cards for your brain. You write something down, you use it for a while, and then you throw it away. Long-term memory is more like a filing cabinet that you put all your important stuff in. I know what you're thinking. Wait, the songs I learned in Mrs. Peterson's class 20 years ago are important? Actually, yes. Emotions play a huge role in learning. They help our brain to decide what's important, which is why childhood songs, embarrassing moments, and emotional experiences tend to stick with us. With ADHD, we don't usually struggle with long-term memory. We struggle with working memory. And remember what I just talked about? Attention? Well, remembering something also requires attention. If we weren't paying attention, that information might not have even made it onto the note card. So, of course, we're not going to remember it. Now let's talk about the motivation paradox. When it comes to motivation, we're either all in or all out. People think we have a motivation problem, but we really have a motivation regulation problem. Remember dopamine? Dopamine helps regulate motivation. Because ADHD brains don't regulate dopamine the same way neurotypical brains do, boring tasks don't always create the same sense of urgency as important or interesting tasks do. But if you throw in a deadline, suddenly it's like someone pulled a fire alarm in our brain and now we're motivated. For many of us, motivation isn't steady. It's either all the way on or all the way off. But our brain isn't the only thing creating these paradoxes. Years of living with ADHD creates them too. Over the years, we learn to manage our symptoms to hide them, or we find ways to compensate for them. Sometimes this is what turns us into the opposite of what people expect. So you might end up having your own ADHD identity paradox, like you're a lazy workaholic, or a careless perfectionist, or a fact-filled forgetter. But before I talk about some of the most common ADHD identity paradoxes, I need to explain why this happens. It often starts with criticism. When you have ADHD, people don't see symptoms, they see character flaws. You're lazy, you don't pay attention, you're careless. But inside, there's a lot more going on. ADHD can make us feel overwhelmed, misunderstood, like we're never good enough, and exhausted. And after hearing criticism for years, it starts to change us. So the girl who is always losing things has a system for everything. The kid who is called lazy all the time is a workaholic who can't relax. The careless one, she isn't careless anymore. She's a perfectionist because her brain is still getting yelled at for mistakes she made years ago. This constant criticism hurts. So many of us learn to hide our symptoms. This is called masking. A lot of us do it without even realizing it, especially at work or school. It can look like pretending to take notes when you're bored during a lecture, or working off the clock so you can make up for all the work you weren't able to get done on your shift. But we don't just hide our symptoms, we compensate for them. This can look like the person who studies twice as hard to get an A, or someone who uses checklists to make sure they remember to do everything. Some of these strategies are healthy, like planning ahead or creating systems. Others, like constantly masking or relying on panic-driven hyperfocus, are not. Because our brains work differently, we all adapt in different ways. Some of those ways are healthy and some of them are not. Over time, they can create what I call identity paradoxes. Here are a few of the common ones. The careless perfectionist. After years of being criticized, many of us become perfectionists. We over-apologize, we over-explain, and we double and triple check things because we're so scared of making mistakes. The organized mess. Some of us are incredibly organized, just not everywhere. You probably know someone who can tell you exactly where something is in their boxes and piles of junk. Or someone who's incredibly organized at work, but you'd never want to take a ride in their car. The lazy workaholic. I did some research, and about 30% of people who are workaholics also have ADHD. This is why a lot of us thrive in high-pressure jobs. What would give a normal person anxiety, we've spent years adapting to. So that 2-week project from school that you crammed into a single day, that could lead to thriving in a fast-paced job as an adult. The fact-filled forgetter. This isn't really a coping mechanism. This is just something a lot of ADHD people do. People with ADHD may know tons of trivial facts, but they can't remember why they walked into a room. Not every ADHD paradox comes from unhealthy coping. Many of us develop skills that help us to become more organized, manage time better, and accomplish our goals. You see this a lot in high-functioning ADHD. When people talk about ADHD paradoxes, they often chalk them up to masking and compensating. But many of us have simply gotten really good at managing our symptoms. That's why we can become the opposite of what people expect. I didn't cover every ADHD paradox, and I don't relate with all of them. I'm not a fact-filled forgetter. I'm more of a forget everything forgetter. So what ADHD paradox are you? I hope you liked this video. I try to create interesting and educational mental health videos. If you liked it, please click the like button and, of course, subscribe. I'll have another video for you guys real soon.